You know that feeling when someone corrects you for the 100th time and you just want to scream. Can you please stop bossing me around? Yeah, that was me, every single day, with my husband, Jason. I used to think he loved controlling everything. The way I folded the laundry, how I stacked the dishes, even how long I let the pasta boil. He'd walk into the kitchen, glance at me stirring the sauce and say, "Babe, you might want to turn down the heat, it's gonna burn," and I'd bite my tongue, roll my eyes and mumble, "God, can I just do one thing my way?" It wasn't like I hated him. Jason was good, stable, the kind of man who paid bills before they were due, who vacuumed under the couch just because dust makes him anxious, but somewhere along the way, his attention to detail started feeling like a list of complaints about me. I remember one Saturday morning, I was scrolling through my phone in bed. The sun was pouring through the blinds and all I wanted was a lazy day. Jason came in, already dressed, already caffeinated, holding a basket of laundry. "Are you gonna start the cleaning soon?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I looked up from my phone and said, "Can't we just chill today?" "It's Saturday," he sighed, set the basket down and said, "Yeah, but the house won't clean itself, Elena," and that's when I snapped. "You know what, Jason? You sound like a boss, not a husband." He just stared at me. Then he nodded, that quiet, heavy kind of nod that means, "Fine, I'll do it myself," and he did. He cleaned. He vacuumed. He cooked lunch. And I sat there, pretending not to care. But deep down, a small part of me felt guilty. Not because I didn't help, but because he looked so tired. Still, my pride wouldn't let me say anything. The truth? I was exhausted too. Not from chores, but from feeling like I could never do anything right. Every small comment from him felt like a critique, a reminder that I wasn't enough. So instead of trying, I started pulling back. If he wanted things perfect, fine. Let him do it. A few weeks later, it got worse. We barely talked unless it was about groceries or bills. Dinners were quiet. He'd eat standing by the counter, scrolling through his phone. And I'd sit on the couch pretending to watch Netflix. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the sink full of dishes like it personally offended him. He wouldn't say anything. Just that disappointed silence that filled the whole apartment. One night, we were both in the kitchen. The clock read 9:30 p.m. I was heating leftovers. He was wiping down the counter for the third time. I said, "You don't have to do that. It's fine," he replied. "Yeah, well, if I don't, nobody will." It hit me like a slap. The way he said it, not angry, not sarcastic, just tired. But I didn't respond. I just turned away, pretending I didn't hear. Because admitting he was right felt like losing some invisible battle I didn't even understand. That night, lying in bed, I could hear him in the living room, the faint hum of the dishwasher, the soft clink of dishes being stacked. He thought I was asleep. And for a second, I almost got up, almost walked out to say, "I'm sorry." But I didn't, because I told myself I shouldn't have to apologize for wanting peace in my own home. Still, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, every comment, every sigh. Every time I'd rolled my eyes when he asked for help, I told myself he was being controlling. But what if he was just asking for support? What if I'd mistaken effort for control? The next morning, Jason was gone early. He'd left a note on the counter, "Made you breakfast. Have a good day." I stared at the note longer than I should have. Something about his handwriting, neat, careful, felt heavy. Like it was holding back everything he wanted to say, but COULDN single quotes T. By lunchtime, I was restless. The apartment felt too quiet. So I started cleaning. Not out of guilt, at least. That's what I told myself, but because maybe it would make me feel less wrong. As I wiped the counters, I found one of his old coffee mugs. The one with a chip on the rim that he refused to throw away. I remembered how he used to joke, "Guess we're both a little broken, huh?" And I laughed. But this time, it hurt. That evening, when Jason came home, he looked surprised. The house was spotless. He said, "Wow, looks good." I shrugged. "Yeah, I got bored." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks, you didn't have to." And then, silence again. That kind of silence that feels like you're both standing in the same room, but living in different worlds. Later that night, I caught him staring at our wedding photo on the wall. He didn't say a word, but I saw something in his face. That mix of sadness and distance that scared me more than any argument ever had. That's when I realized maybe we weren't fighting about dishes or cleaning or cooking. Maybe we were both just lonely in different ways. I wish I could say I understood him right then, that I put my arms around him and fixed it all. But I didn't. I was still too proud, still too hurt. And I had no idea how close we were to breaking completely. After that night, something inside me hardened. If Jason wanted everything done his way, then fine, I'd give him exactly what he wanted. Perfect meals, spotless counters, folded laundry so crisp it could slice your fingers. But I'd do it my way, cold, mechanical, without a drop of warmth. It wasn't about helping him anymore. It was about making him realize how it feels to live with someone who's there, but not really there. The next morning, I woke up before him for the first time in months. I made his favorite breakfast, eggs over easy, turkey bacon. Black coffee all timed to perfection. When he walked in, he looked almost confused. "Wow," he said, rubbing his eyes. "This is unexpected." I smiled sweetly. "Well, you like things done right, don't you?" He chuckled, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. "Yeah, I guess." I sat across from him, watching him eat, waiting for him to notice something. The emptiness behind my smile. But he didn't. He just ate quietly, thanked me, and left for work. That's when I realized how deep the distance had gotten. He didn't even question why I suddenly turned into the perfect wife. Days passed like that. I cooked, I cleaned. I did laundry before he even asked. And every time he thanked me, I gave him that same polite smile. The kind you give to a stranger at the grocery store. It was my version of revenge. Not yelling. Not fighting. Just silence. Emotional withdrawal. At first, it felt good, powerful even. I thought, let's see how he likes living with a robot version of me. But the funny thing about revenge? It doesn't stay satisfying for long. By the second week, the silence between us had grown so thick. It felt like fog. We barely spoke. When he came home, he'd compliment dinner, I'd nod, and we'd drift into our separate corners of the apartment. One night, as he was taking out the trash, I overheard him mumble to himself. "She doesn't even look at me anymore." It wasn't loud, just a whisper, but it hit me like a punch. Because he was right. I'd stopped looking, stopped listening, stopped seeing him. Still, I couldn't admit it. I told myself he deserved it for all the times he'd made me feel small. All the times his words made me feel like a failure, but the more I tried to justify it, the heavier it felt. A few days later, we went to dinner at his parents' house. His mom, Linda, is the kind of woman who notices everything. Halfway through dinner, she looked at us and said, "You two okay? You've been awfully quiet tonight." Jason smiled tightly. "We're fine, Mom." I forced a laugh. "Just tired, that's all." Linda's eyes lingered on me, soft but sharp. "You sure?" I nodded, but I could tell she didn't buy it. On the drive home, the silence was deafening. Halfway there, Jason said, "You didn't have to fake a smile for my mom, you know." I looked out the window. "I wasn't faking." "Yeah, you were," he said quietly. "You've been faking everything lately." That cut deeper than I expected. So I snapped. "Oh, I'm sorry. Should I go back to being the lazy, ungrateful wife who can't do anything right? Would that make you feel better?" He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "That's not what I said." "No, but it's what you meant," I shot back. He didn't respond. Just kept driving, jaw tight, eyes forward. The rest of the ride was silent. When we got home, he went straight to the bedroom. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the leftover dessert from his mom's house. I picked up a fork, took a bite of pie, and suddenly started crying, not because I was sad, but because I didn't even know what I was angry about anymore. Was I mad at him for being controlling? Or was I mad at myself for letting the distance grow this wide? That night, I barely slept. I could hear him breathing next to me, steady and calm, while my thoughts raced like a storm. The next morning, he left early again. When I came into the kitchen, there was no breakfast note this time. Just an empty coffee mug in the sink. That tiny detail broke me more than any argument could. Later that day, I went to the grocery store. I was standing in the cleaning aisle, staring blankly at bottles of detergent when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jason. "Won't be home till late. Big project at work." I typed out okay. But my thumb hovered over the send button for a few seconds. Then I deleted it because I didn't want to be okay anymore. I wanted him to notice that something was wrong. That night, when he came home past 10, I was sitting on the couch with the TV on mute. He looked exhausted, eyes sunken, tie half undone. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I replied, not looking up. He hesitated, then said, "Did you eat?" "Yeah." "Okay." He went to shower and I sat there in the dim light, feeling like we were strangers living in the same body of memories. Then something happened I didn't expect. When he came out of the shower, he didn't go straight to bed. He sat next to me. "Elena," he said quietly, "are you happy?" I froze. "What? Are you happy with me?" My throat went dry. For a second, I didn't know what to say. So I lied. "Of course." He nodded slowly. "Okay," but the way he said it, soft, broken, I knew he didn't believe me. That night, I dreamed of the early days, our first apartment, our late-night pizza runs, the way he used to laugh when I'd burn toast. We weren't perfect, but we were us. When I woke up, I realized how far we'd drifted from that version of us. And for the first time, the revenge didn't feel satisfying anymore. It just felt lonely, but I wasn't ready to admit that out loud, not yet. Because I still thought I was the one being wronged. Little did I know, The real truth about Jason's bossiness was about to hit me harder than I could ever imagine. Asterisk I don't know exactly when things started to collapse. Maybe it wasn't one big moment, but 1,000 tiny ones we kept pretending didn't matter. But that night, the night Jason finally broke, I stopped pretending to dot. It was a Wednesday. The kind of cold, gray evening where even the air feels heavy. Jason texted me that he'd be late again. I'd gotten used to that by now, the big project at work excuse. So, like always, I ate alone, leftovers, a half-warm dinner I didn't even taste. By 9, the apartment was quiet. I sat at the table, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, pretending I wasn't waiting for him. When the front door finally opened, I didn't even look up. Until I heard it, the sound of something hitting the floor. His keys, Jason? I called out. No answer. I turned around and saw him standing there, still in his work clothes, hair messy, eyes glassy like he hadn't slept in days. He looked defeated. Hey, I said softly, you okay? He gave a half laugh. It wasn't the kind of laugh people make when something's funny. It was the kind that hurts coming out. I'm fine, he said, but his voice cracked halfway through. I stood up, suddenly nervous. You don't look fine. He rubbed his temples and sat down on the couch, elbows on his knees. I just need a minute. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to go to him, but another part whispered, don't, he's the one who pushed you away. So I just stood there, arms crossed, watching him. After a few seconds, he said without looking up, do you know how it feels to hold everything together and still be told it's not enough? That one sentence. It sliced right through me. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. He laughed again, bitter. Tired. You think I like nagging you about dishes? About cleaning? You think I wake up excited to remind you to do things that should just happen? I flinched. Wow, thanks, Jason. That's real nice. He shook his head. That's not what I mean, Elena. He looked up at me then, eyes red, voice shaking. I'm saying I'm tired. I'm tired of feeling like I'm the only one holding this marriage up. Something in me snapped. And I'm tired of being treated like a child you have to manage. Then why won't you act like a partner? He shouted. The words hit hard to hard. It wasn't just anger in his voice. It was pain. He stood up suddenly, pacing the room. Do you know how it feels to come home every night and see you checked out? To do the dishes, fold the laundry, cook dinner, pay bills, and then still feel like somehow I'm the bad guy for wanting help? My heart was pounding. I never asked you to do all that, Jason. No, he said quietly, you just stopped caring when I did, and that silence afterward was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. He sat back down, his shoulders shaking slightly. I realized he wasn't angry anymore. He was crying. Jason never cried. Not once in all our years together. I froze. Jason. He wiped his face roughly, like he was ashamed of the tears. Do you know how lonely it is to sleep next to someone who doesn't even notice how hard you're trying? I swallowed hard, but the lump in my throat wouldn't move. He continued, his voice breaking. I wasn't being bossy, Elena. I was begging. I was asking you to just see me, to stand next to me for once. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt the tears on my lips. All the times I'd rolled my eyes at him, all the times I'd called him controlling, they flashed through my head like a cruel montage. He wasn't controlling. He was drowning. And I hadn't seen it for so long. I'd told myself I was the victim, the wife with a controlling husband who never let her breathe. But standing there, watching him fall apart, I realized how wrong I'd been. He looked up again, exhausted. I can't keep doing this alone, Elena. I just can't. I took a small step toward him, then stopped. I didn't know how to bridge that distance anymore. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I whispered. He gave a tired smile. I did. Every time I asked for help, every time I reminded you about something, that was me telling you. You just didn't hear it. I sank onto the couch beside him. For a long time, we didn't speak. The only sound was the soft hum of the fridge, the clock ticking on the wall, counting every second of silence we'd built between us. Finally, he said quietly, I'm not mad at you. I'm just empty. That word, empty, it terrified me because I realized that's what he'd become. Not angry, not frustrated, just hollow. And I'd helped put him there. I wanted to say something, anything, to take it all back. But no words felt big enough to fix what I'd broken. He stood up slowly and said, I'm gonna sleep on the couch tonight. I grabbed his wrist without thinking. Jason, wait. He looked at me, tired, gentle, and distant all at once. Elena, he said softly, you don't have to fix it tonight. I just need a break from trying. He pulled his hand free and walked toward the living room. The sound of the couch creaking as he sat down felt like a door closing somewhere inside me. I stood there in the dark, staring at the spot where he'd just been. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt scared that maybe this wasn't a fight anymore. Maybe it was the slow, quiet ending of something that used to feel like home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, his words, his face, the way his voice cracked when he said empty. And somewhere between guilt and heartbreak, I made myself a promise: tomorrow, I'd try to really see him. Not as the bossy husband who told me what to do, but as the man who was just tired of doing everything alone. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. For a second, I thought maybe last night had been a dream, maybe we hadn't said those things. Maybe he hadn't cried. But when I walked into the kitchen, Jason was there, sitting at the table, his coffee untouched. Staring blankly at his phone. Morning, I said softly. He looked up, forced a smile. Hey, his voice sounded calm, like someone trying not to feel anything. I wanted to apologize right then, to throw my arms around him and say I get it now. But the words felt stuck in my throat. So instead, I said, you want breakfast? He shook his head. No, I'm good. The silence that followed wasn't angry, it was hollow. Like two people standing in the ruins of something they both helped destroy after he left for work. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from me. I kept hearing his voice from last night. I wasn't being bossy. I was begging. That line kept echoing in my head until I couldn't take it anymore. So I decided to do something. Not to fix everything overnight, but to start showing up again. I cleaned the apartment, really cleaned it. Not the kind of fake revenge cleaning I'd done before, but the kind that comes from wanting to make things right. I organized his desk, packed his lunch, even left a note inside that just said, I see you. I'm sorry, it was small, but it felt honest. That evening when Jason came home, I was cooking dinner, real dinner, not leftovers or something thrown together. He looked surprised. You cooked? I nodded, smiling nervously. Yeah, thought I'd try not to burn it this time. He gave a tiny laugh. The first one I'd heard in days. We sat down to eat, and for a few minutes, it almost felt normal. Until he said quietly, you don't have to do this because you feel bad. I'm not, I said quickly. I just want to. He studied my face for a second, like he was trying to decide whether to believe me. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, after dinner, we sat on the couch, both pretending to watch TV. The distance between us felt smaller, but still there, like an invisible wall we didn't know how to break through. After a few minutes, I said, Jason, can I ask you something? Sure. When did you start feeling like this, like you were doing it all alone? He sighed, setting the remote down. Honestly, a while ago. But I didn't want to make it a thing. I figured it was just a rough patch, and when it didn't get better, he smiled sadly. Then I started trying harder, which, I guess, just made you feel worse. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I thought you were trying to control me. I know, he said softly. But I was just trying not to lose you. That sentence, I was just trying not to lose you, hit like a knife wrapped in love. I felt tears build up, but I blinked them away. You didn't lose me, I whispered. He looked at me for a long time before saying, didn't I? We didn't talk after that. Just sat there, both pretending that silence could fill the gap words had made too wide. Later that night, when he went to shower, I walked into the bedroom and opened my phone gallery. Old pictures, beach trips, birthdays, blurry selfies from late-night drives. There we were, laughing, messy, happy, and I wondered, when did we stop being those people? I realized that somewhere between work stress, bills, routines, and expectations, we'd stopped being teammates. We turned into opponents. That night, I wrote something in my notes app. Love isn't about splitting chores. It's about sharing weight, emotional, mental, everything. When one person starts carrying too much, the balance breaks. I don't know why I wrote it. Maybe to remind myself. Maybe to keep from forgetting what it felt like to almost lose someone. Not because they stopped loving you, but because they got tired of fighting alone. The next few days were quiet but softer. Jason wasn't distant anymore, just cautious. Like someone walking across a frozen lake, afraid to step too hard. He started smiling more, but his eyes still carried that fatigue. One evening, I walked into his office. He was sitting at his desk, surrounded by paperwork. Hey, I said, you've been at this for hours. Want me to make you some tea? He looked up, surprised. Sure, that'd be nice. I came back a few minutes later, handed him the mug. He smiled, that gentle, tired smile I'd missed. Thanks, he said. I hesitated, then placed my hand over his. I mean it, Jason. I'm sorry I didn't see what you were carrying. He squeezed my hand back. I didn't mean to make you feel small, Elena. I just didn't know how to ask for help without sounding like I was nagging. I laughed softly. You were a little bossy, he smiled. Yeah, I know, we both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes with a few tears behind it. That night, when he held me, it felt different. Not like a routine. Not like a habit. But like a quiet promise, the kind that says we're trying again, but life isn't a movie. Healing doesn't come wrapped in one heartfelt apology. The next morning, he got a call from work. An emergency meeting, another late night ahead. And I felt that familiar irritation rise again, that whisper in my head saying, here we go. Back to him being too busy, too tired, to everything, but this time, I stopped myself. I remembered his face from that night, the tears, the exhaustion, the word empty. So instead, I said, don't worry about dinner. I'll save you a plate. He looked at me, maybe surprised by the softness in my voice. Thanks, he said quietly. When he left, I exhaled, not out of relief, but out of realization. Maybe love isn't about never getting angry or frustrated. Maybe it's about choosing understanding over ego. That night, I sat on the couch alone, scrolling through our wedding photos again. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like the victim in our story. I felt like the partner I was supposed to be. Still, something in me knew the hardest part wasn't over yet. Because once you start seeing someone's pain, you can't unsee it. And Jason's pain ran deeper than I'd realized. The next chapter of our story wasn't going to be about apologies or chores. It was going to be about rebuilding trust and learning what it truly means to stand beside someone who's been standing alone for too long. It had been 2 weeks since the night everything fell apart, and somehow we were still here. Not perfect, not even okay all the time, but trying. The air in our apartment felt lighter now. Not full of silence, but pauses, gentle ones. Like the kind people take when they're learning how to speak again. Jason was different. Not in big ways, in small, fragile ways. He smiled more often, but his eyes still looked tired. Not just I need sleep tired, but the kind of tired that sits in your bones. That Friday, he came home later than usual. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair messy, tie loosened. I was sitting on the couch reading, but when I looked up, I saw it, that look in his eyes again. The one that said he'd been holding the world together all day. You okay? I asked softly. He nodded, but his voice cracked just a little. Yeah, just a long day. Want to talk about it? He shook his head. Not really. Then he paused, like the words were fighting their way out. But maybe I should. He sat down next to me, elbows on his knees, rubbing his face like he didn't know where to start. After a long silence, he said, you know what's funny? Everyone at work thinks I'm this calm, confident guy. They come to me for advice, for help, like I have it all figured out. But most days, I feel like I'm just pretending. I stayed quiet, letting him breathe. He looked at his hands. I wake up every morning already tired. I get through meetings, calls, emails, all while thinking, don't screw up, don't let anyone down. And then I come home and... He hesitated. Sometimes I feel like I'm still performing, still pretending to be okay. The weight of his words hung heavy in the room. Jason, I whispered. He smiled faintly, not happy, more like broken acceptance. I know it's not your fault. You've got your own things. But I guess I just wanted home to be the one place I didn't have to hold it all together. And when that started to fall apart too. He looked at me then, eyes glassy, voice shaking. I didn't know how to fix it without losing myself. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. I'd spent so long thinking I was the one hurting that I never saw how hard he'd been fighting to keep us from collapsing completely. I should have seen it, I said quietly. All the times you stayed up late working, or forgot to eat, or went silent. I thought you were ignoring me. But you were just drowning. He let out a small laugh through his tears. Yeah, drowning quietly, that's pretty much my specialty. I reached over, took his hand. You don't have to do it quietly anymore. He looked at me, eyes softening. You really mean that? I do, I said. I know I can't fix everything for you. But I can listen. I can be here. Something in his face shifted then, like a wall cracking just enough for light to slip through. He nodded slowly. That means more than you think. We sat there for a while, no words, no noise. Just breathing together like maybe silence wasn't our enemy anymore. After a while, he leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You know what scares me the most? What? That one day I'll wake up and realize I've spent my whole life trying to prove I'm enough. And I never actually lived. That sentence hit me so hard it physically hurt. Because I'd felt that too. The endless proving. The quiet exhaustion of trying to be seen. I whispered, then maybe we stop proving and just be together. He turned to look at me, eyes wet. You really think we can do that? I think we already started, I said. He smiled just a little. The kind of smile that feels like sunrise after weeks of rain. Later that night, I found him in the kitchen, standing in front of the window with a glass of water. Couldn't sleep? I asked. He shook his head. Just thinking about what? About us. About how close I came to losing you. I walked up, wrapped my arms around him from behind. You didn't lose me, I said against his shoulder. You just scared me. He laughed quietly. Fair enough. We stood there for a while, no talking, no overthinking, just breathing the same air, feeling the warmth return slowly, like a home reheating after winter. And in that stillness, something inside me healed, not because everything was perfect again, it wasn't, but because I finally understood what love was supposed to feel like. It wasn't fireworks. It was choosing to stay when things got messy. It was learning someone's silence, not resenting it. It was hearing the things they never said and loving them anyway. The next morning, I woke up early and made breakfast. Not as an apology this time, but as a quiet promise. When Jason walked into the kitchen, his hair still damp from the shower, I smiled. "Coffee's ready," he raised an eyebrow. "Are we switching roles now?" "Maybe," I said with a grin. "You've been carrying too much." My turn, he walked over, kissed my forehead gently. "You're really something, you know that?" "Yeah," I said, smiling softly. "So are you." We ate together in peaceful silence. And for the first time in months, it didn't feel forced. It felt like home again, but as I looked across the table, I could still see something in his eyes. A shadow, faint but real. He was opening up now, but I knew there were still parts of him buried deep. Parts he hadn't said yet, and somehow, I knew the next chapter of our story would dig even deeper into the past, the pain, the pressure that had built this man I loved, and nearly broke him. I never thought one quiet Sunday morning could change everything. The sun was soft through the curtains, the air smelled like coffee and pancakes, and for once, life felt peaceful. Almost too peaceful. Jason was sitting at the kitchen table, still wearing his sleep shirt, scrolling aimlessly on his phone. His coffee had gone cold. He looked far away, like his mind was someplace I couldn't reach. "Hey," I said gently, setting down a plate beside him. "You good?" He blinked, almost startled. "Yeah, just thinking." That answer again. The one that used to annoy me. But this time, I didn't roll my eyes or push. I just sat beside him. "Wanna tell me what about?" He hesitated for a long time, then sighed, that kind of sigh that comes from years of carrying something heavy. "About my dad," he said quietly. I stayed silent. He'd rarely ever talked about his father. He used to say that men don't get tired. Jason continued. "That real men handle things, provide, protect, don't complain." He let out a small, broken laugh. So I didn't, not once. Even when I wanted to scream, I just kept it together. I felt my chest tighten. He wasn't angry now. He wasn't defensive. He was just a boy who'd grown up thinking emotions were weakness. "I remember," he said softly. "When I was 16, he came home drunk. Mom was crying, and I told her I'd take care of everything. I promised her that." He looked at me then, his eyes glassy. "I think I've been trying to keep that promise ever since, even when there was nothing left to fix." Tears filled my eyes. "Jason." He shook his head, smiling faintly through the pain. "I thought being strong meant never breaking, never asking for help. So when you called me bossy, maybe I was. But I didn't know how else to survive." The truth hit me like a wave. Every nag, every reminder, every argument, it wasn't control. It was fear. Fear of failing. Fear of letting someone down. "I wish I'd known," I whispered. "I wish I hadn't made you feel like you were the problem." He reached for my hand across the table. "You weren't the problem, Elena. I just didn't know how to love you in a way that didn't look like control." Silence. Not awkward, sacred. And then he said something that shattered me completely. "I thought if I ever stopped doing everything, everyone would fall apart. Including you." That was the moment I realized how much weight he'd been carrying, not just for me, but for every person in his life who ever needed him. I squeezed his hand. "You don't have to hold everything anymore." He looked up, eyes tired but soft. "Then what do I do instead?" "Let me hold you," I said. He smiled, small, genuine, fragile. The kind of smile you make when you've been holding back tears for years. He got up, came around the table and pulled me into his arms. And for the first time in forever, I felt him exhale, like he'd been holding his breath his entire life and finally decided to let it go. We stood there for a long time, wrapped in that quiet moment. No words, no promises, just truth. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaky. "I used to think you didn't care when you ignored me, but now, I think you were just trying to breathe too." I nodded against his chest. We both were, and just like that, something inside both of us shifted. All the resentment, the anger, the guilt, it didn't vanish, but it softened. Like fog lifting after a long storm. That night, we sat on the couch, watching some old movie neither of us really cared about. Halfway through, he leaned his head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked. "For trying to fix you instead of understanding you." I smiled sadly. "And I'm sorry for calling you bossy when you were just trying to hold us together." He chuckled softly. "Guess we were both a mess, huh?" "The best kind of mess," I said. We laughed then, real laughter. Not the polite kind you use to fill silence. It felt strange, but right, healing. When the movie ended, I looked at him and said, "You know, I used to think love was supposed to be easy." He looked back, eyes gentle. "And now?" "Now I think love is about showing up, even when you're both tired. Especially then." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think that's it." Weeks passed. Life didn't magically fix itself. We still argued, still forgot things, still had long days and hard nights. But something was different. He started leaving sticky notes on the fridge that said things like, "Don't forget to smile or you don't have to do it all today," and I started leaving him messages like "Dinners on me tonight, no complaints or take a break." Superhero, it wasn't about control anymore. It was about care. One night, months later, he looked at me across the dinner table and said, "Remember when you called me bossy?" I laughed. "Oh God, don't remind me," he smiled. "That was the day I realized I'd lost you a little, and now?" I asked. "Now," he said, reaching for my hand, "I realize I never really had to be the boss. I just needed to be honest." I smiled. "And I needed to listen." He squeezed my hand. "We both learned the hard way, didn't we?" "Yeah," I said softly. "But sometimes the hard way is the only way that sticks." We sat there in that warm little kitchen. The same one that once held so many arguments and tears, now filled with laughter, understanding and second chances, and as I looked at him, I realized something simple but powerful. Love doesn't always sound like "I love you." Sometimes it sounds like "I'm here." Sometimes it sounds like rest. Sometimes it's just silence, the safe kind. I looked into Jason's eyes and whispered the truth that had been waiting inside me all along. "You were never bossy, Jason. You were just tired of doing everything alone." He smiled, peaceful, grateful, and said, "And I'm not alone anymore." For the first time in years, I believed him. End of story. I called him bossy until I realized he was just tired of doing everything alone.